Two-thirds of the U.S. population are under heat alerts across 27 states where temperatures are expected to reach triple digits. Four of the largest power grids issued several types of warnings: Texas, California, Midwest, and the Mid-Atlantic. Joining us right now to talk about the challenges ahead for the grid operators is Tim Fox, ClearView Energy Partners Vice President of Research. And Tim, let's talk this through. I know there have been some extreme situations that really do put a lot of demand on the grids. Is the grid up to the task?
Well, good morning. Yeah, last week's heat wave and what's extending to this week is the kind of event that can keep grid operators awake at night. High temperatures across wide areas of the U.S. for long periods of time. And record-breaking heat creates record-breaking demand on the grid. Now, generally speaking, the market operators have handled this event fairly well. As you mentioned,
I haven't heard too many issues of severe breakdowns or power outages.
Correct. Yeah. So proactive actions taken to encourage customers to reduce demand before they hit too much, before there is a supply inadequacy, helped the market operators avoid taking more severe actions, which an example would be a forced outage.
What do the grids do to deal with this? What is buffering? How does it work?
Right. So absolutely. So markets tend to have capacity reserves. They try to keep more capacity available, even if it's not likely to be used, in order to account for events of high stress. Now, what they did in this event were the quickest steps, the first steps. They called on consumers, particularly energy-intensive consumers like factories, to reduce their demand. And those customers often get paid to do so. And that allowed them to reduce the peak in order to keep the full grid operating.
Wait, the plants are paid not to operate? I thought it was more of a stick approach where if you are operating, you're going to pay much higher prices.
So there are programs called demand response, and the customers that are energy intensive can benefit by choosing to reduce their demand. And
where across the country would you say the biggest potential for breakdown is? Who has the strongest grids? Who has the weakest grids? I think of places like California and maybe Texas as places where there is some patchwork, some problems, only because we've seen problems there in the past. Have they been able to improve on those situations?
Well, they have been. I think those are two good examples. As you mentioned, they both have experienced recent events over the past couple of years. Texas is an interesting story because they have done well so far. As I noted, they issued alerts, but they have not had any grid outages. The issue with Texas is that they have a large population growth. A lot of people are moving to that state, and so the state needs to ramp up quickly. One of the bills that the state legislature enacted this year was a law that provides very low cost interest loans to power plants, to natural gas power plants that come online. So the state's trying to respond. In California, we're seeing a somewhat different approach. Obviously, California is a lot more green. The state is, or at least has a lot more green objective. And the state was looking to deploy a lot more energy storage to support the state's high solar and wind.
And, okay, is it working? Because when I think of California, I think, okay, they've put all these green initiatives in. It's not going to be able to be managed. And by the way, their grid, I just think of the electricity grid there as being one that they have not invested in over the years. From what I hear from people, look, that's a dangerous situation if you want to get into it, because you're going to have to raise rates if you really want to invest and bulk up that grid. Is that still the case?
That is still the case in a lot of respects. California is dealing with power prices getting higher and higher, particularly at the retail level. Consumers are paying more and more for a reliable grid. California also faces somewhat unique issues, particularly with wildfires. But thus far, at least in this occurrence, the California grid has operated without having to have forced outages.
And when it comes to Texas, it's a different situation, I hear there. That's deregulation. You have a lot of small players, maybe not all working in conjunction. Is that still the situation, or have they gotten better about an overarching way of handling big stressors like a heat situation like this?
Well, the grid operates as a market, and so the high prices certainly provide incentives for power plants to get online and to stay online. There was huge swings in prices. We saw prices that were 8 to 10 times more than the annual average in some markets, including Texas. And so there's a natural incentive for these plants to operate.
Is that for consumers too? If I'm using my air conditioning, I'm going to be paying 8 to 10 times what I was 2 months ago?
Well, so there's a little bit of a lag. The prices of electricity, are set by the most expensive plant needed to operate. Now, these high prices, as I said, are good for the power plants, but customers' retail electricity bills will eventually reflect the higher prices paid today. It's just a question of how soon.
Well, that sounds like a situation for some massive backlash. That's been the problem with Texas in the past, where all of a sudden you were getting charged, completely outrageous prices that no consumer can really anticipate or expect or be able to pay.
Right, and that happened to be part of Texas's deregulatory retail programs, where the retail customer was much more susceptible to changes in wholesale market prices. Now, Texas, after the 2021 winter storm, is moving away from that and trying to get more customers on a program where the regulators, the California PUC, can try to smooth out those increases over a longer period of time. So you won't see the aggressive swings that we saw in late 2021 following Winter Storm Uri.
So is that something that's working, or do you think that this is going to be a backlash that we don't find out about for another month or two?
Yeah, well, it might not, and it might be longer than that to really find out exactly how much the prices will be paid. I think a lot of people will be watching the PUC's proceedings to see to what degree consumers may experience price hikes. It's the kind of event that can encourage state legislators and policymakers to get involved, as we've seen in Texas and elsewhere.